For over a century, the Middle East has been at the center of one of the most controversial and complex political struggles in modern history. At the heart of this conflict lies the Zionist project, an ideology and movement that has shaped the geopolitical reality of millions, especially Muslims, in profound ways. To understand what is happening today, from the displacement of Palestinians to the normalization deals being signed across the region, Muslims must first grasp the origins, objectives, and implications of Zionism. The Zionist project began in the late 19th century as a nationalist movement among European Jews who believed that the Jewish people should have their own homeland. At the time, Jews were scattered across various countries, often facing discrimination, and many leaders of the Zionist movement saw establishing a nation-state as the only way to ensure safety and continuity. However, what began as a political idea soon became a reality with deep ramifications, especially for the indigenous people of Palestine. Theodor Herzl, known as the father of modern political Zionism, argued that Jews would never be accepted in Europe and needed their own sovereign state. In his book, The Jewish State, published in 1896, he advocated for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine, despite it being inhabited by a diverse and predominantly Muslim and Christian population. Herzl and other Zionist leaders were well aware of this, but believed that colonial powers could help make the dream a reality. The British Empire played a crucial role in legitimizing the Zionist agenda. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration was issued, a letter from British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Lord Rothschild, a leader in the British Jewish community, declaring support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. This was done with little to no consultation with the native Palestinian population, who made up over 90% of the region at the time. This declaration marked the beginning of systematic displacement and political manipulation in the region. As Jewish immigration to Palestine increased, tensions with the Arab population also grew. The Zionist leadership sought to create a demographic and political reality that would eventually allow for the formation of a Jewish state. This involved acquiring land, often through purchase or political pressure, and gradually establishing separate institutions, militias, and governance systems parallel to the British Mandate authorities. For Muslims, understanding the distinction between Judaism and Zionism is crucial. Judaism is a religion followed by Jews all over the world, many of whom do not support the political ideology of Zionism. Zionism, on the other hand, is a nationalist political movement that sought and succeeded in establishing a state, Israel, at the expense of the Palestinian people. Opposition to Zionism is not inherently anti-Semitic, and many Jewish groups and scholars themselves have criticized it as a distortion of their religious and ethical values. By 1948, the Zionist project culminated in the declaration of the State of Israel. However, this was not achieved without cost. Over 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly expelled or fled from their homes during what is known as the Nakba, or catastrophe. Entire villages were destroyed, massacres occurred, and hundreds of thousands became refugees, scattered across the region. This marked the beginning of a new era of struggle, where Palestinians were not only denied a homeland, but also subjected to continuous occupation, discrimination, and marginalization. The displacement of Palestinians did not mark the end of the Zionist project. It was only the beginning of its entrenchment. Following the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, Zionist leaders moved quickly to consolidate control, establish international legitimacy, and create a narrative that justified their actions. This narrative portrayed the land as empty before the arrival of Jewish settlers and ignored the centuries-old presence of Arab Muslims and Christians who had lived, cultivated, and worshipped in Palestine. Muslims must understand that the Zionist strategy was not limited to military power or land acquisition. It also involved cultural erasure and rewriting of history. Many Palestinian towns and villages were renamed with Hebrew names, historical records were altered, and new maps were drawn to remove Arab identity from the land. The goal was to make the state appear not as a colonial project, but as a return of a people to their ancestral home. This narrative appealed to Western guilt over the Holocaust and allowed Zionism to gain sympathy and financial support, particularly from Europe and the United States. Yet, for those living under Israeli rule, the experience was far from peaceful or democratic. The Palestinian population that remained within the newly established Israeli borders were given second-class citizenship. Their lands were confiscated, their movements restricted, and their civil rights curtailed. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel occupied the West Bank, Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights, bringing millions more Palestinians under military rule. This occupation continues to this day and is a key element of the Zionist project's ongoing expansionist agenda. Zionist expansion was justified under the concept of Greater Israel, a belief held by some that the Jewish state should extend from the Nile River to the Euphrates. While not all Israelis or Zionists openly advocate for this vision, settlement expansion in the West Bank and the refusal to withdraw from occupied territories reflect this deeper ideological goal. For Muslims, especially those living in the Arab world, this ambition represents not just a local threat, but a regional danger that aims to destabilize and fragment neighboring countries. A significant component of the Zionist project has been the use of strategic alliances and influence over global powers. The United States, in particular, became Israel's strongest ally, providing it with billions in military aid annually, vetoing UN resolutions critical of Israeli actions, and framing the conflict through a pro-Israeli lens in media and politics. This alliance is not just political, it is ideological. Zionist lobbying groups have worked tirelessly to equate criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, silencing legitimate concerns about Palestinian suffering. One of the most important things Muslims must recognize is how the Zionist project has affected not only Palestinians, but the entire Ummah. The division of Muslim lands, the creation of proxy conflicts, and the normalization of relations with Israel by some Muslim-majority states are part of a broader strategy to weaken collective resistance. The promise of economic deals, military cooperation, or political gain is often used to lure leaders into compromising on the Palestinian cause. However, the long-term cost is a loss of moral clarity and unity among Muslims. Over time, the struggle against Zionism has taken many forms: armed resistance, diplomatic efforts, grassroots activism, and academic scholarship. Yet the underlying principle remains the same: to expose the injustice, demand accountability, and defend the rights of the oppressed. For Muslims, this struggle is not merely political but spiritual. It is about standing up for truth, justice, and the sanctity of human dignity, values deeply rooted in Islam. As the world changes, the Zionist project has adapted as well. It has embraced digital warfare, disinformation, and economic pressure as tools to maintain dominance. Muslim voices that speak out are often censored, targeted, or discredited. Palestinian activists face imprisonment, exile, or even assassination. International institutions, often influenced by powerful Zionist lobbies, fail to enforce their own resolutions. Despite this, the resilience of the Palestinian people and the growing global awareness offer hope. Young Muslims must educate themselves on the history, ideology, and tactics of the Zionist movement. They must be able to differentiate between criticism of a political ideology and hatred of a people or religion. By understanding the true nature of the Zionist project, Muslims can resist manipulation, reject normalization that legitimizes oppression, and advocate for justice in a meaningful and informed manner. As Zionism continued to evolve into the 21st century, it became more than a political project. It developed into a deeply entrenched global system of influence. Through media, education, economics, and diplomacy, the Zionist narrative positioned itself as the default worldview in many Western societies. This system not only justified the existence of the State of Israel, but also criminalized dissent, labeling any criticism of Israeli policies or the Zionist ideology as a form of hate speech. For Muslims, this shift represented a new battlefield, one that requires intellectual awareness and ideological clarity. The Zionist project has benefited significantly from control over mainstream narratives. Hollywood films, popular media, and even school textbooks have often presented a sympathetic view of the Israeli state, while portraying Arabs and Muslims as violent or backward. The result has been a generation of people, both in the West and beyond, growing up with a one-sided understanding of the conflict. Palestinians are frequently presented as aggressors and Israel as a victim, despite the clear imbalance of power and historical evidence of systematic oppression. This distortion is not accidental. Zionist lobby groups such as AIPAC in the United States and similar organizations in Europe have spent decades cultivating relationships with politicians, funding media campaigns, and shaping public opinion. Their goal is to ensure that Israel is seen not just as a legitimate state, but as a vital ally in the war on terror and a beacon of democracy in a hostile region. Muslims must be conscious of these tactics and recognize that the conflict is not simply about land, it is about power, identity, and truth. The normalization of relations between Israel and some Muslim-majority countries in recent years has caused deep division within the Ummah. While these deals are often framed as pragmatic or economically beneficial, they represent a betrayal of the Palestinian cause. The so-called Abraham Accords, for example, offered nothing to the Palestinians, who continue to suffer under occupation and apartheid conditions. Instead, they granted Israel greater legitimacy and regional acceptance without requiring any concessions or changes in its behavior. Muslims must ask, at what cost are these relationships being built? The Quran teaches that justice is a central pillar of faith, and standing with the oppressed is a moral obligation. When governments pursue alliances with a state that continues to oppress Muslims, desecrate sacred sites, and violate international law, they undermine these very principles. This does not mean Muslims should call for endless war or conflict, but it does mean that truth and justice must never be sacrificed for short-term political gain. Another essential point for Muslims to understand is the deep spiritual and symbolic importance of Al-Quds, Jerusalem. The city is not just another piece of territory, it is the third holiest site in Islam, a place where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, led the prophets in prayer during the miraculous night journey of Isra and Miraj. The Zionist occupation of East Jerusalem and the frequent violations at Al-Aqsa Mosque are not merely political provocations, but attacks on Islamic identity and heritage. Time and again, Israeli authorities have allowed or supported settler groups to storm Al-Aqsa, disrupt prayers, and desecrate the sanctity of the site. These acts are met with silence or mild condemnation by much of the world, but they should be a wake-up call for Muslims. Defending Al-Quds is not just a political stance. It is a duty tied to our religious identity and historical memory. The Zionist project seeks to erase this connection, to claim exclusivity over the city, and to transform it into a symbol of Israeli sovereignty. In response, Muslims must reclaim the narrative. This begins with education, teaching our youth the real history of Palestine, the origins of Zionism, and the resilience of those who have suffered under its weight. It requires investing in media, arts, and scholarship that tell our stories authentically and unapologetically. It means supporting institutions that defend Palestinian rights, challenging falsehoods in public discourse, and standing firm against normalization that whitewashes decades of injustice. The Zionist project also poses challenges beyond Palestine. Its influence in shaping foreign policy, especially in the West, has contributed to the invasion and destabilization of other Muslim nations. From Iraq to Syria, from Libya to Iran, Zionist interests have often aligned with campaigns that weaken or divide the Muslim world. The strategy is clear. Fragment the Ummah so that no united resistance can emerge. Muslims must see these events not as isolated conflicts, but as interconnected parts of a larger agenda. The fragmentation of the Muslim world has been one of the greatest enablers of the Zionist project. While Muslims across nations share a common faith, history, and many cultural ties, political disunity has weakened their collective stance. Former colonial powers drew arbitrary borders that divided communities, empowered weak or corrupt leaderships, and fostered rivalries that continue to this day. Zionism has thrived in this environment, where Arab and Muslim countries often find themselves in conflict with one another, rather than uniting against a shared injustice. For decades, Israel has exploited divisions between Muslim-majority countries by forging secret alliances, launching cyber and espionage operations, and supporting proxy forces that disrupt regional stability. The goal is not just survival, but dominance, ensuring that no regional bloc emerges strong enough to challenge its authority. Many Muslims are unaware of the scale and sophistication of these operations. The Zionist intelligence agency, Mossad, is among the most powerful in the world, operating with impunity across borders and often beyond international law. This reality demands that Muslims move beyond slogans and emotional reaction. It is not enough to chant in protest or express outrage online. We must understand the mechanisms by which Zionism functions globally, how it operates through soft power, lobbying, economic leverage, and military dominance. Knowledge is the first form of resistance. Every Muslim has a responsibility to be informed, to question, and to share the truth with others. Ignorance is the ally of oppression. Another key feature of the Zionist strategy has been its effort to create divisions within the Palestinian movement itself. Over the years, political factions like Fatah and Hamas have found themselves in bitter disputes, weakening the overall cause. While differences in ideology and strategy are natural, the inability to form a united front has been one of the most exploited vulnerabilities. Israel continues to use this division to maintain control, delay negotiations, and avoid accountability. Muslims must call for and support unity, not only among Palestinians, but also among themselves. The Zionist project is not confined to one generation or one geographic area. Its roots lie in long-term planning and ideological persistence. Therefore, resistance must also be strategic, informed, and intergenerational. The Palestinian cause should not be treated as a seasonal issue that flares up only during times of war or social media trends. It must remain a constant focus in our hearts, homes, mosques, and institutions. Education systems in many Muslim countries have also been influenced or pressured to avoid discussion on Palestine and Zionism. Some textbooks gloss over or entirely omit the Nakba. Others present a neutral stance on Israel, as though this is a dispute between equals. This whitewashing of history is dangerous. When younger generations grow up without a deep understanding of the Palestinian struggle, they are more likely to fall for the deceptive narratives of normalization and peace without justice. It is imperative that Muslims revive and protect historical memory through authentic education. Economically, the Zionist project is deeply tied to global finance and trade. Israel is a leader in technological innovation, arms manufacturing, and cybersecurity. Many of these industries are directly or indirectly linked to the occupation, tested on Palestinians and then sold globally. Muslims must be conscious of the products and technologies they support. Boycotting companies that fund or benefit from the occupation is a peaceful yet powerful form of resistance. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions (BDS) movement has shown how collective economic pressure can influence policy and raise awareness. Yet participating in BDS, or even speaking out against Zionist policies, can come with personal risk. Many Muslim students, activists, and professionals in the West face harassment, blacklisting, or career obstacles for standing with Palestine. This intimidation is designed to isolate and silence dissenters. But the more they try to suppress the truth, the louder and clearer it must become. Standing with justice is not always easy, but it is always right. Spiritually, Muslims are taught to oppose zulm, oppression, wherever it exists. The Zionist project, from its inception to the present day, has embodied systematic injustice, dispossession, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, and the denial of basic human rights. While the global political system may be slow to act, the moral clarity of Islam offers no ambiguity. Supporting the oppressed is a duty, regardless of political pressure, financial risk, or social backlash. Throughout history, empires and ideologies that thrived on injustice have eventually collapsed. Pharaohs, colonizers, tyrants, all were eventually brought down by the power of truth and perseverance. The Zionist project, despite its military might and political influence, is not immune to this pattern. Its greatest fear is not armed resistance alone, but informed, united, and morally resolute Muslims who refuse to accept falsehood and betrayal. The resistance to the Zionist project is not confined to borders or battlefields. It lives in the hearts and minds of people across the globe. From South Africa to Indonesia, from Turkey to the United States, Muslims and non-Muslims alike have raised their voices for Palestine, challenging the lies and confronting the system of apartheid that Zionism has entrenched. This growing international solidarity is a testament to the power of truth, and it must be nurtured and expanded with wisdom, strategy, and persistence. For Muslims, the Palestinian cause is more than political. It is a test of our collective consciousness. Every generation is given an opportunity to stand against oppression and to decide where it stands in the face of injustice. Today, as Palestine bleeds, as Al-Aqsa is repeatedly desecrated, and as homes are demolished to make room for illegal settlements, the question is no longer whether we know what is happening. The question is, what will we do about it? It begins with ourselves. Muslims must strive to be well-informed, to rise above propaganda, and to connect with authentic sources of information. Imams and community leaders must speak clearly and regularly about Palestine, not only during times of crisis, but as part of continuous education. Schools, universities, and Islamic centers must integrate the history of Palestine, the ideology of Zionism, and the implications for the Muslim world into their curricula. If we do not teach our children the truth, someone else will teach them lies. Our du'as, prayers, are powerful, but they must be accompanied by action. Supporting Palestinian charities, defending the rights of Muslim voices in the West, promoting awareness campaigns, and lobbying policymakers are all forms of modern jihad, struggling in the path of justice. Boycotting products that fuel oppression, writing articles, hosting forums, and challenging biased media, these are weapons that do not require violence, yet strike at the very foundation of the Zionist system. Muslims must also avoid falling into the trap of division. The Zionist project benefits whenever we turn against one another: Sunni versus Shia, Arab versus non-Arab, nationalist versus pan-Islamist. But Palestine is a cause that transcends sectarianism. It is a unifying symbol of resistance for the entire Ummah. In every masjid where hearts ache for Al-Aqsa, in every home where parents teach their children to love justice, in every soul that whispers a prayer for the oppressed, there lies a rejection of the Zionist project's ultimate goal: to erase and divide. There is also a pressing need for courage. Too many Muslims, especially in influential positions, have remained silent or neutral under the pressure of politics or profit. But neutrality in the face of injustice is complicity. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, warned us that when we see evil, we must stop it with our hands, or at least with our tongues, and that the weakest form of faith is simply recognizing it in our hearts. Today, speaking the truth about Zionism is a moral duty, even when it is unpopular or dangerous. What Muslims should also remember is that justice is not something we pursue only when victory is guaranteed. We struggle because it is commanded, and we stand firm because our faith demands it. Palestine may remain under occupation for now, but its people have not surrendered. Every martyr, every prisoner, every mother who buries her child with tears and dignity, they are the proof that Zionism has not won. It may control borders, but it has not broken spirits. The struggle for Palestine is not just about land or sovereignty, it is about the soul of humanity. It is a call to remember that no power is absolute, that truth cannot be buried forever, and that faith gives us the strength to endure what the world deems impossible. From the alleyways of Gaza to the refugee camps of Lebanon, from the broken olive trees of the West Bank to the occupied streets of Jerusalem, this is not a story of defeat, but of resistance. Muslims must prepare for the long road ahead. Victory will not come overnight. It may not come in our lifetime, but we plant the seeds of resistance, knowing that others will water them, and Allah will bring them to harvest. We stand for Palestine, not just because they are our brothers and sisters, but because their struggle is our struggle, their pain is our pain, and their liberation is our liberation. The Zionist project may possess weapons, money, and influence, but Muslims possess truth, faith, and the power of unity. And in the end, no project built on oppression can endure. History has proven this time and again. The rise of injustice is only temporary. What remains eternal is the promise of Allah, that He is with the oppressed that justice will prevail, and that the believers must never lose hope. So let every Muslim, young and old, rich and poor, scholar and layperson, carry this knowledge in their heart, that the Zionist project is not an abstract issue or a foreign problem. It is a test of our values, our faith, and our commitment to justice. And in this test, silence is not an option. May Allah strengthen the oppressed, expose the oppressors, and grant us the courage to stand firm until Palestine is free.